Hi, welcome to Planetary Calendars, Astro Portraits. I'm Ralph Dimichis, one of the calendar's astrologers, along with Lonnie Dimichis. The portrait this time is part of the three-part series that started with Queen Elizabeth II, then went on to Prince Phillip, and now we're going to look at the two charts together. Okay? Elizabeth, of course, is a Taurian born April 21st, 1926, at the first degree of Taurus. Philip was a little older. He was born June 10th, 1921, at 10 a.m. BST at Mount Repose, Greece. He is a Gemini. They both had Leo moons. It's kind of interesting. In fact, right in the middle of Leo, Elizabeth was at 12 and Philip's was at 15 degrees. Philip was Leo rising, where Capricorn rising Elizabeth, she really represented that formal sense. And so their risings were very close to quincunx. It was from Elizabeth was 21 degrees and his is at 19 degrees. Now we have his time as 10 a.m. He was born in, I said, Greece. It could be an approximate time. Usually with royals, they're pretty good about knowing the times, and people are born right on the hour. But that quincunx between the rising is interesting, because normally you're looking for sextiles and trines between couples, and but I've noticed a number of times that quincunxes between the risings show up in couples quite often. 150 degrees, and the thing is, we always say 150 degrees. Oh, it's not. It's like you're out of contact. The two signs. It's one sign off of the opposite sign. You don't have. You're not the same element. You're not the same. It's not also a fire sign. It's not also a cardinal sign. There's no connection. And yet, if you look at the signs that connect Venus together, right, which is Taurus, Libra, and then the exaltation Pisces, and then the opposite signs, which are Aries, Scorpio, and Virgo. The way the triangles those form are made up of two quincunxes and a sextile, which is known as a yod. And a yod is known as the finger of God. It means remarkable things come out of this. And many times when I look at quincunxes, rather than thinking they're not in contact, I think that there's something else going on here. There's some Venusian energy that's reaching out between these two people and connecting them. There's that unknown space where all kinds of remarkable things can happen. And that's what they have. He's the Leo rising to her Capricorn rising. She's very formal. He's very outgoing. He's very dramatic. She's the Capricorn's the sign of the grandmother. Leo's the sign of the royal, the king. It's interesting. There's a certain magic that goes on in those two. Now, their suns are, from 0 degrees Taurus to 18 degrees Gemini. So it's 48 degrees. Is that right? Yeah, 48 degrees apart. So there's no major aspect going on there. There's some minor stuff going on. Their Marses, though, are interesting. Their Marses are trine. His Mars is in Gemini at 24 degrees. Her Mars is at 20 degrees Aquarius. So physically, they like doing stuff. They like doing the same stuff. Like they're comfortable physically going places. And of course, these people probably, in the requirements of their life, required them to travel and to do stuff. And they were outdoors people. They were, they go off on the hunts and they go off and their schedules can be very, very intense. But where they're continually on the go, opening up theaters and going to banquets and such. So they like that type of same physical activity. They're very comfortable with each other. It especially worked well because his Jupiter, or her Jupiter, is in 22 degrees Aquarius. It gave her a lot of physical energy. It trined his Mars. And so he picked up energy from her. And also her Jupiter trines his sun. It trines his sun. Jupiter to sun. Well, that's the relationship between the king and the prince. It's funny. It's between the royal and the prince. If you look at the symbolically at a chart, the sun is the king or the queen, right? Jupiter is the prince. It's it's way out there in space. It's the country gentry. It's the lord of the manor. And then when you look in the chart and you see Jupiter and the sun come together in transit, it basically means that Jupiter now has, the sun has now come by to visit Jupiter, or Jupiter has come by to visit the sun. So someone's dropping by for dinner. And that conjunction each year when Jupiter and the sun come together is always a kind of a very interesting time. It means there's a lot of energy going on, parties or something. So he benefits her. If you have Jupiter right on someone's sun or vice versa, they will tend to benefit you. If you have the sun in Aries and someone else has Jupiter in Aries, you will tend to benefit that person with that Aries. Okay, it works like that. You always look in Saturn in charts, and that's kind of interesting because Philip has Saturn in Virgo, and she has Saturn in Scorpio. Now, it's 18 degrees to 24 degrees. It's a sextile. It's not the most exact sextile, but it's within 6 degrees. So once again, in terms of how they accomplish long-term goals, about how they deal with their responsibilities, they support each other. They're not at loggerheads. If you had a square between the two of them, that would be more difficult. They would be at loggerheads about what they want to accomplish. But these two could work in harmony. And it's a sextile, so it's an easy harmony. It's like cousins, which marrying one's cousin among the royals is not that unusual. What's interesting is her Saturn is retrograde and highly elevated in her chart, Elizabeth's chart, which is the removal of the father, retrograde, Scorpio. Where his Saturn is in Virgo. And it's not only on Virgo, it conjuncts Selena and Astrea, two asteroids. So he learned a lot from his father. And it's in Virgo, along with Jupiter, Hygeia. He learned the things he learned from his father, the type of instruction that his father was able to bring to him or make available to him, the education he was able to gain, was a major resource. This is a man actually who had tremendous skills. Okay, it's interesting too. Remember, Virgo is the other Mercury-ruled sign. So he's got the Sun, Mars, and Pallas Athena in a Mercury-ruled sign. Hygeia, Jupiter, Selena, Saturn, and Astrea in a Mercury-ruled sign. And then on the 7th house, he has Aquarius, Elizabeth's Mars and Jupiter, right? Well, these are the 3 extrovert signs of Mercury. One thing about him is he was a jokester. He loved jokes. He loved tricks and things like that. And it's one of the ways in which they got along. He made her laugh. Now, this is interesting too, because when you look at his chart, you have 19 degrees Leo rising. What does she have at 19 degrees Aquarius? Her Mars is at 20, her Jupiter's at 22. Her Juno, her marriage asteroid, is at 26, sitting right there in his 7th house, opposite his rising, right on his descendant. He looks at her and he sees a partner, right? She's got Capricorn rising, right? Her 7th house is really kind of complex. It's Vesta, Pallas Athena, Pluto, Hygeia, North Node. So this is a reincarnational thing. It's about being a warrior goddess. It's about keeping the flame alive. It's about, long-term stuff. He has Pluto and Mercury and Selena, Ceres in the 7th house. But most interestingly, opposite her rising, most directly, is Mercury in Cancer. Remember I said he makes her laugh. There was something about him that always came to her as being youthful. Her good-looking young man, you might say. And he was a very tall, very good-looking young man when she met him. She was quite, they were quite the couple. They were quite a good-looking couple. He was quite handsome. and dashing and military officer. His Venus, right, is at 13 degrees Pisces. Her Venus is at 5 degrees Taurus, right? A sextile, another sextile going in there. This is kind of interesting. His Mercury is at 13 degrees Cancer, right? We talked about that already. That lands over in Elizabeth's 7th house. Her Mercury is at 10 degrees or 4 degrees Aries. So the two Mercuries, they're not quite square to each other, but they're close enough to notice it. You would think that this would be more trouble than it is. Mercury's communications and you're at squares to each other, except the fact that Mercury likes squares. Why do we know Mercury likes squares? Look at the 4 rulerships of Mercury. It's the two main rulers are square each other, Virgo and Gemini. They're square each other. The detriments are square each other. So yeah, Mercury does really well with square. Why? Because Mercury is about thought. It's about coming to something at 90 degrees from the other person so you can challenge it. There's some sparks off. If everyone's coming from the same direction, how do you grow? If everyone's, always harmonious, I always get along with this other person's ideas, I always like their ideas, how do you grow? How do you not keep making the same mistakes? How do you do something different? If you come to it from 2 different angles, boom, you bump into each other, but now you find ways to discuss it and work it out. And so for them, it actually worked out well, the 2 Mercury squares. The Venus sextiles, that's nice. You don't want Venus challenging each other. You don't want Venus challenging each other. You don't want Saturns challenging each other. They're not good at it, okay? She has Jupiter in Aquarius. He has Jupiter in Virgo. This isn't, once again, it's not quite a quincunx. What's kind of interesting about it is that these are 2 of the rulerships of Mercury again, right? Mercury, remember, it's the 3 extrovert signs. It's Gemini, Virgo, and then Aquarius. It's that little triangle. So there's a lot of communication going on here. I mean, there's a lot of pathways here where they could exchange information. What's funny is that one of the ways that he would have really read her was by body language. And, she had the Mercury in Aries. She could be quite feisty. He had the Mercury in Cancer. He could be quite grouchy. But he could really read her body language, and that's, I think, a lot of people around her, they could tell from her physical presence that Mars and Jupiter and Aquarius, her physical, posture, how she was feeling, what she thought about things. That would have been really evident. And remember, with her Capricorn rising, that Saturn in Scorpio in the 10th house, she would have always come across as being kind of severe. She would come across as being very reserved, as being very in control, and being very powerful at the same time. With him, with his Leo rising, it goes back to that sun in the 11th house. One thing about Gemini is it's 2. He was always the partner to someone. It wasn't him by himself. It was about him as the partner. It's interesting how the 2 people got together. They really supported each other. But his role was very much subordinate to her. His role was very much about, his career was his wife. Venus in Taurus at the midheaven conjunct her sun. His career was very much about his wife. Her goal was very much about being a mother. The Cancer in the 7th house. Her career was very much the Saturn in Scorpio in the 10th house, carrying on the legacy of her father, who died so young. Where with him, he has Venus in the 10th house, it's about the reputation of his wife and of his love. So it's a very loving relationship and also a lot more fun than I think most people would have realized from the outside. But that's Queen Elizabeth, Prince Philip, happily married for many, many years, now both passed. Remarkable people. I hope you found that interesting. That's the conclusion of that little three-parter we just did. Come back and see us on Tuesdays at Planetary Calendar Astrology on YouTube. Please subscribe and push the little bell so you get reminded. So when the forecasts come up on Fridays, you'll know when those are coming up too. And you find all those at Planetary Calendar Astrology. And then make sure you go to planetarycalendar.com to get your day planners, your pocket versions, your wall versions, and your digital versions. Until next time, be well.